Hey everybody, I'm just doing a little bit of an update today. I do want to apologize in advance. I'm actually doing a long print in my hobby room, and I try not to actually do videos while I have a print going on, otherwise it has a lot of whining and noise in the background. But some of what I'm going to talk about today actually has to do with my 3D printer and what I was kind of doing with it today. And so there's a little bit of background noise for this, but I'm actually working away on my Ungors. They're just about done, but I've been doing their shields, and really the only thing other than just putting some flock and stuff on the bases that I need to do and to varnish them is to actually just do, I'm doing 6, I thought I was doing 10, but when I counted out, I'm doing 6 custom shields on the Ungors, just to sort of mix in some of that sort of Oldhammer fantasy look. And I'm actually just, I've been doing a fair bit of hobbying lately. I'm actually going to take the evening off and just sit down fresh and work on those 6 shields and get them done all in one shot. Don't have any idea on the design. I have a tendency to kind of go just wing it and just see what happens. I find my best designs come out that way. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a little bit of an Oldhammer purchase, a little bit of Saga Age of Magic as far as what I'm planning on doing with some of the larger creatures. And I could talk a little bit about a game I played, because I actually had a game of Saga Age of Magic. And then I mentioned the 3D printing. I think I mentioned that already. I just want to talk a little bit about that too. I'll talk about the Saga Age of Magic, the game, real quick. I had almost full game, 4 rounds of a game. We had to end it a little early, unrelated causes to the game. But I really enjoyed the game. I'm actually quite excited for it. I'm getting ready to do a review on the book. I said I was going to do that and the one for the Book of Battles a while ago, but I even want to get a little bit more, a couple more games in, and I do have a number of friends that are interested locally in playing it. I found that it basically is more Saga, in the sense that it doesn't radically change the game to a different game. I find that, your older units that you have in the game, like your Levy, your Hearthguard, your Warriors, like these typical sort of types of units are still just as useful as they were before. I also found the new units, the creatures and the monsters and the sorcerers, are not game-breaking, but quite interesting, and I foresee them as being very effective in certain scenarios. In particular, the large creatures, I think, are going to change the balance of the game a bit and the way you approach things. Like, I think you'll have to deal with these large creatures, and rather than just perhaps taking the same kind of lists you might have in the historical, you're probably going to be utilizing the newer units and newer strategies to deal with these large creatures. And so I think it's very interesting. And I think that the best way I can describe it is, I've always found that the sort of dichotomy of balancing the movement and rules and the sort of battle board strategy, as well as the unit versus unit power levels, or how some units are better against others and how you use them and that sort of strategy, balancing all of these sort of touch points to be a very intriguing part of Saga, and in the way you experience a game, and then all of those things, I forgot to mention the most important thing, all of those things then interact with fatigue, the currency of the game. And I find Saga Historical, in the way it is a complete game, and I like it, and I will continue to play it, despite liking Age of Magic. I do find that Age of Magic, at 8 points instead of 6, and with these, newer units that then add more, depth in the sense of the type of unit versus unit power balances, and then Magic, to add more Saga on top of Saga, probably a little bit of a harder curve for a beginner if you've never played Saga before, to just jump into Age of Magic. It, by far, and I'll talk about this in the rulebook, is the biggest expansion that I've seen on Saga, because what they had to put in it to incorporate fantasy. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. I really didn't know what I was going to experience, and I was really pleasantly surprised. So I'll talk a little bit more about Age of Magic in the future. I've only really had a partial game, but really liking it so far. One of the things I have in front of you here, I'll just start by just showing it, is I am planning on doing stuff for the Musty Oldhammer Challenge for Beastmen. And in particular, the biggest thing, I really do want to use them for Warhammer Fantasy. It's always top of mind, 6th edition. But the biggest thing I'm thinking right now is to get a variety of units on the table for Age of Magic Saga. One of the things that I had picked up years ago, and I really had no particular plan for this, it was before it was being announced for Saga, it was really just an Oldhammer purchase. And I picked this up on a whim. Somebody was selling it for a good price on Facebook. And I was thinking, after playing my Saga game, what I could do for a Scourge. Now a Scourge is really a winged creature that can have a breath attack that you can use within Saga. You could really probably use a variety of models. I definitely think dragons and wyverns were top of mind when they created this thing, but you could potentially have a flying demon or something else, but it's meant to fly, and it's meant to potentially have a projectile attack. They call it a breath attack, but I'm sure even some sort of other attack that mimics a breath attack with your model could be used. It's one of the things that gives you some flexibility with Saga. I thought this would be great because it's a nice Oldhammer dragon. It's very slim, but as I'll show you in a moment, I think it really fits the models quite well, like for this game and like the other kind of big creatures. So I did kind of green stuff this up and putty it and fill in some gaps. There wasn't too much to do, but I put some supportive where the joints go in there. I actually I used a lot of 5-minute epoxy on some of the weight-bearing areas rather than crazy glue initially, and then but for the wings I did use crazy glue, and then I used some green stuff just to support that and to blend in some of the mold lines. Then I decided I wanted him a little bit higher than just this base here, because without this he probably would have, I don't know, reached maybe this high off the table. I want him to go a little bit higher, and just to show that flight. And so I decided to print a base, because I didn't have one, and I printed a base that was 60 by 100 to match my Giant's base. I figured this was a really good amount. I didn't want something too thin. I was thinking 60 by 60 at one point, but I don't want them to topple over with the wings and things. But this is an old sculpt. I didn't really talk about it, but I'm sure Jankmaster will probably comment on this. He knows more, but I believe this is a Nick Bibby dragon, although there were some other sculptors that sculpted some of these old dragons too, listed in the catalog page. This is, at least in the catalogs, within 87, 88. I have it in the pictures. So this is quite an old piece, but I think it's beautiful, to be honest. I love one of the things I love is the cartoon look of the face. It's just very thin, but he's got sorry about that, I'm going in too close. You can see his eyes and his teeth, his snaggletooth teeth, the really thin mouth, and everything's like kind of really exaggerated. I really quite love it. Even here, I noticed, and some people painted this, they took advantage of it, but even here there's a little bit of the gum that shows. This isn't a tooth. It looks like a gum of this tooth, like going into the mouth there. And so really not only beautiful, but I never really knew what I was going to use this for, and it's just funny how things work out. I'll show you, just up against just a little beast man here, just like, this is like a gore. You could see picture a unit of these, and he'll actually be quite formidable looking. He doesn't look too tiny. Unfortunately, with a lot of the old miniatures, big multi-part metal miniatures from the Oldhammer, like they're not quite as big, of course, as contemporaries of plastics. But I'll be quite honest, I think this one has really stood the test of time on its size and how it could be used in these games. It's, despite the fact that it's very thin, and you can see even like the legs are kind of thin, big enough to be like as big as a person, like a leg on this dragon, but it's still not like a smog or anything like that by any means. But it's so long and the wingspan so big that it still looks really formidable and scary, kind of looking like a dragon. Now, to illustrate that, this would be even though it's an old model, this would be a sort of more current sort of giant that I'm going to be using most likely as a Titan or Behemoth. I'm thinking I'm going to use him as, ideally I'd be using him as a Titan, because Titans are meant to be in Saga sort of slower, in some cases dumber, sort of, but more defensive monsters as compared to Behemoths, which are a bit faster and more offensive and deliver a lot of damage, but not as defensive. And so, in any case, this actual base size is going to be the same. And I think he obviously fills out this base nicely, just as he does. And so, I can't see how you can't argue that that's actually not quite a good matchup for two monsters, one being a Scourge and one being Titan or Behemoth, you know, for Saga Age of Magic. So this will be my Chaos Titan, most likely. We'll see. And yeah, I think that, you know, this model is not new by any means, but it is the sort of contemporary giant. I don't think they've felt a need to replace it. It's just sort of worked. Both they work against, you know, I could see them both ramming into a group of Levy warriors or Hearthguard and being quite sizable, you know, with the base. So I sculpted, one thing I didn't really focus on here is I did actually 3D print this base because I didn't have one. I thought, why buy one? You know, for, I don't know, $10 or whatever they are. I'll just print one. It printed out really good, and then I had a problem after printing this, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But that's the sort of, I just quickly sculpted with some epoxy sculpt, just a bit of a mound, you know, for this thing to be on top of. Ooh. Yeah. And so it's technically still curing, but it's been over the 3 to 4 hour mark, so it's pretty solid to the touch. So after printing this base, and it, you know, it could have been a little bit more solid, but because I got all that epoxy sculpt on top, it really looked fine to me at the time. I then wanted to print a print of a skull mound for my goblins in particular. In Saga they have a sacred ground piece that you put down, and it's meant to be like a piece for your faction of terrain. Well, I printed this thing, and it is, in the morning I noticed that it was just basically not solid at all. It was more holes than plastic, and you know, I just got my 3D printer going again after not using it for a while, and it was starting to have a loss of performance. But what ended up happening is I just ended up replacing the nozzle today, and the nozzle, I've never replaced it yet since having it, and I do know most people do replace them eventually. I've tried to clean it as best as possible on the inside, but the nozzle looked like this when I took it out. And you can see the outside is quite gnarly looking, but even on the inside, there was black stuff in there. Yeah, it's pretty nasty, and so I got a brand new one on there. Now, since printing the brand new one, I'm actually running this same mound, and it's coming out beautiful. I'll kind of show that actually before it ends. I can just show you how it's actually looking now. But what I thought I'd like to do a test print before I actually get going with the crazy mound again. And, you know, what I did print is just some more shields. I haven't cleaned these up yet. But these shields actually came out really nice on my Beastmen. And so they have to be cleaned up a bit still, but again, I probably saved close to at least $10, you know, by printing these out and trying to source them from somewhere, $10–15. But they have actually, once they have the paint on them, they actually look really good in my opinion, and so much so that I'm actually not worried about using them on my Oldhammer miniatures, you know, that I do spend quite a bit of change in order to procure these kind of collectibles. And so, yeah, one thing I just wanted to show here is this is a local acquisition, so I didn't have to pay delivery, but I actually got myself some original single cast Tzeentch Renegades, you know, for Warhammer 40k. Some more Oldhammer. Now these have to go in the dip. You know, these just came this way, and actually you know, they're kind of aged a bit, but they're actually they did a pretty nice paint job on them. I actually really love the look of Thousand Suns. Like, even though I'm getting ready to put these in the dip, just sitting here on the table, the sort of yellow, gold, and the blue, the clash of those colors, I just really makes me excited to have these, actually. I don't know why, I just love the Thousand Suns. After reading all the books in the Armin series and Thousand Suns books and things, I got it myself a Sorcerer, which I didn't have. This is the standard one, but these are all metal, and so including the Sorcerer. He comes in resin as well. And then I have an older one that I didn't have, and so Bolt Pistol and, you know, the sword, Chaos Sword, etc., Power Sword. I actually have another 20, these are 10 here, Chaos Tzeentch Renegades that have already been stripped, that are ready to go in the future. And I have another Sorcerer like him of the same line, it's just that he's carrying a staff, he's a bit different. And I have Ahriman, the grand sort of sorcerer of the Thousand Suns. I have another, like a fantasy sort of style sorcerer on a disc. And even some little doodads, like little cultists, old cultist style brats and things, like, you know, from the past that I was going to use as a little group of kind of worshippers, grovelers, you know, because I'm thinking that this is going to be an Oldhammer project in the future. You might not see these for 2 years, but that's what I tend to do. Time goes by quick, but I sort of like collect something like this, and then I'll just pull it out and I'll do like a Musty Oldhammer challenge with it. Do them all at once. So that's what I'm thinking about doing with that. So lastly, I'll before I go, I'll just show just how the print's going now that I've actually done the nozzle, and you can see the difference. I'll bring that sort of really that sort of hollow thing that I just showed you. Sorry, this area is not as well lit here, but as you can still probably see, this here is quite a bit more solid now. That honeycomb is just the structure within, but it's actually solid, like all of it, compared to this thing that I had here, which is just really garbage, because it was basically, even though the machine thought that it was printing just fine, then because the nozzle didn't have a flow that was appropriate, it basically, the plastic wasn't coming out and grabbing on and creating a solid structure. This seems to be coming out quite nice, and so I'll show this once this is finished. Okay, everybody, so that's it for now. I'll be back probably showing off my Ungors finished pretty soon, and talk to you later.